Okay, good morning, church. It's good to be together as we celebrate the promises of God. We're going to have communion today, so if you are at home watching us virtually, which we're grateful you are, get your communion elements ready, your bread and your wine or your juice, so you can celebrate with us. We can become one. Now, we are entering into, I think, a really exciting series. It's going to talk about really the foundations and what it is that we believe and in whom that we believe. And so in a few minutes, we're going to say the Nicene Creed together, which is a historic creed. It's the oldest. It dates back 1,700 years, actually, in its beginning formation. And it is an opportunity for us to be reminded of what makes us one, what makes the church, and how we live into that. So in that light, we're going to consider a passage in 1 Corinthians today, one of Paul's two letters that we have to the Corinthian church. It's the 3rd chapter. We're picking up in the 10th verse. If you picked up a Bible out there, it's page 1144. If you're using an electronic device or you're with us virtually, use the New International Version. I encourage you, simply because it's what we've got and it's easy for it. Nice for us to have the same the same wording on the page. Now, Paul's two letters to the Corinthians are filled with all kinds of incredible theology, encouragement, challenging, some chastisement, all of those things. And none of it really makes sense if we don't understand the context of Corinth itself. So, a little bit of rudimentary liberal arts geography right now. You've got the Aegean Sea and the Ionian Sea. And between the Aegean and the Ionian is this peninsula, really. It's like a big spit of land called Peloponnesia. And what connects Peloponnesia itself to the Greece mainland is an isthmus, or this narrow sort of thing. That is, at its most narrow, 4 miles across. Okay? So it's 4 miles across. But if you're sailing, you can't get across it by sailing. If you're sailing, you have to sail 430 miles to get to the same side, the other side. Are we together? So you got 4 miles, you got 430 miles. So for millennia, people have been trying to figure out what can we do at that 4 mile spit. There's a canal there that's actually there now. It was built in the late 1800s. It's now too small really to even have much value. But what was happening at the time of Paul's writing to the church in Corinth was they had built a series of tracks, and they would take ships, put them on like these rail cars almost, and then roll them across that 4 miles. It could take days or actually weeks in the amount of time, because people were all lined up to do that, because it saves so much time and expense to be able to go across that 4 mile spit of land. We together? Okay, so that's interesting in and of itself. Corinth, which is right near that most narrow spot, is a city of estimated between 200 and 400,000 residents. It's hard to know because there were so many other people that were there all the time. People coming from the ships, ship captains, sailors, people in commerce. It was all kind of going, so people coming and going continually. And Corinth was an incredibly wealthy city. It was incredibly wealthy because of all this commerce that came as ships and goods were coming from the Ionian to the Aegean, from the Aegean to the Ionian. So it is incredible. Now, when I was there a couple of months ago with about 20 of us in the church, 20 some of us in the church, this is something that really stuck with me. And I've been to Corinth a number of times, but this is a picture we've got. Now, these are the ruins, part of the ruins, massive city. Most of the excavation has really never happened, so it just kind of gives you an idea. And then you see that big monolithic thing up there, right? The hill, that's massive. Acres across the top. It's massive. It's called Acro-Corinth, like the Acropolis, Acro-Corinth. And at the top of that, for centuries, was a temple, or actually a series of temples. And the temple was to the goddess Aphrodite. Or in Roman mythology, it would be the goddess Venus. Okay, leave the picture up for a little while because I want to kind of use it as a way for us to be able to kind of walk through this. Now, each Roman city, each Greek city really had sort of patron gods. Corinth had Apollo, but mostly Aphrodite. And where we get the word aphrodisiac, so you kind of know what went on. Okay? I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Up at the top, the historian Strabo said that for centuries the temple would be burned by enemies or other invading armies, or torn down, they'd rebuild, they'd do all of this. There were, at its prime, 1,000 cultic slave prostitutes. The temple to Aphrodite, right? And those 1,000, we believe, as best we can tell, those 1,000 were identified by having shaved heads. So their head would be shaved, and as we learned when we were there, the belief is that those shaved heads identified you as a temple slave, and that meant that you were free use. Not only at the temple, but anywhere in town. If you were seen, you were, I don't need to say more, right? Please don't say more, Jim, please. You know what I'm saying? It's like you were free use. And that was what their role was. That's what they did. That was their role as these slaves in the temple, or of the temple. And so you've got this incredibly prosperous city that continually prays to Aphrodite because Aphrodite protects them, gives them commerce. Their belief is you pray to this god and all this happens. And one of the ways you appease this god or satisfy this god is with this incredible sexual promiscuity. So when you read Paul's letter to the Corinthians, you'll notice that, or both of his letters really, you'll notice that Paul talks about certain things that he doesn't talk so much about in most of his other letters. He talks about the role between men and women, because up here, this temple was really run by these cultic priestesses, these women who were in ultimate power. They were the only ones, we believe, that could speak in that temple. Men were not allowed to, and they ran all of this industry, this sort of sexual kind of industry. They ran all of that. So you've got Paul talking about the role between men and women, about women, whether they speak in church or not, how that all works. He talks about head coverings. Now just think about this for a moment. If Strabo is right, and what we believe historians tend to think, you've got really 3 strata of women in Corinth. So you've got the temple prostitutes, the slaves, shaved heads. You've got the women that are not slaves, long hair. It identifies them, right? Identifies them. And then you've got the women who wear a head covering. Now, the women that wore a head covering in the Roman world, really the Greek world, but mostly the Roman world, are women that were under the protection of someone. They had a father who was a citizen. They were married to someone who was a citizen. They were protected. And so that meant, as you're walking through town and you see a woman with a shaved head, free use. You see a woman with long hair, You see a woman with a head covering, stay away from her. That's trouble. That's the one that's protected. So when Paul starts to talk about people wearing head coverings, women wearing head coverings in church, he's talking about it in this context. And so the sense is that what we find is what's happened is that Paul has built this understanding of the church that has brought women with shaved heads, women with long hair, women with head coverings, all together to be part of one body. And he's saying we're all going to wear coverings because we're all under the protection of Jesus, right? But it's really, really interesting when you start to look at all of this. Now, my point in this is that you can stand anywhere in Corinth and not look one direction and see that huge monolithic stone. And so everything in Corinth reminds you, it's a shadow that looms over the moral life of all of Corinth, the moral landscape. And it's there, and you just see it, and it's always there. And whether it's active or it's always there. And so that's Paul's context. That's how he's writing these letters, by saying things that you're going to see in just these 8 verses today, he's going to talk about a temple. He's going to talk about foundations. And it's all in light of, or I guess I shouldn't say in light of, it's all because of the shadow of what's happening there and how it plays out into the larger city. Are we together? Really fascinating, isn't it? I mean, really fascinating. Let's go to God's word. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, beginning with verse 10. Paul says, "By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one should build with care. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It'll be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it's burned up, the builder will suffer loss and yet will be saved, even though as one only escaping through the flames. Don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person, for God's temple is sacred, and you together are that temple." That's the word of the Lord. Fascinating. So, this week, busy week for us at the church. Great picnic coming in just a few minutes and all these great things happening. But our preschool kicked back off in the fall. And our preschool is one of the bright lights of First Pres. I mean, I think we're probably the best in the country, in my opinion. 160, 170 kids from infants up through kindergarten. And it is just unbelievable. And Hunter and Scarlett and their team have just built all our teachers and all. And I think our teachers are really the superheroes, right? I mean, someone said to me once that their preschool teachers are the superheroes who change the world one glitter-covered disaster at a time. And they're the ones who have to be surprised every day, every single day. They act like they've never heard it before when someone says, "Guess what? Guess what? Guess what?" Did have one of our long-term teachers been teaching for like 30 years. She told me once that she had the most interesting thing ever said by a kid in preschool, and you can imagine how interesting that must have been. And she said, one little girl came in and said, "Hey, I've got a secret." And she said, "Well, you can tell me your secret." And she looked at her and she says, "My parents have bodies buried in the backyard." And she came to tell me because the family was in the church. So, and if you knew the family, you might even know the family, you'd know exactly how that played out. But really, so the thing about preschool is that all the studies show us, whether it's a child psychologist, it's educators, it's neuroscientists, all this, is that those first 6 years of a kid's life are the most formative years of everything. I mean, they form and shape in how they're going to do academically, how they're going to do socially, how they're going to do emotionally. All of those first 6 years are so critical. And that's why we desire and have this great privilege to be able to pray into them and to work into their lives in such beautiful, beautiful ways. But here's the thing that I always find fascinating. These years are the most formative in their lives, the most formative in your lives. And yet, all that those teachers are doing, the vast majority of it, they will never remember. It's really not till 4 you start to get the cerebral, all this stuff, to be able to keep that long-term memory, and then it's really later, and you start to look at your life, and even if you've got a great childhood and all that stuff, you can remember little things, but you don't remember the narrative of that time. And so we're kind of working with this idea that this is the most important years and all that you pour into them and all that's there, and yet they don't remember it. And I think about that. I've got 2 grandsons. You might not know I had grandsons, but I do. I've got 2. And there's a 6 and a 4-year-old, and I'm thinking about all this love and all that their mom and their dad and their grandparents and all pour into them, and all this fun stuff that I've done with them, and like, they're not going to remember that. And I think that's the point. Because the things that really matter, the things that shape everything really, are the things that are really unseen. I think that's why Paul uses language of foundation. when he talks about foundation, because the foundation is something that's under the ground. You don't see it. There's all these illustrations about the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? Hundreds of feet high, keeps leaning. It's going to fall one day on some bar or something, I don't know. And one of the reasons it's falling is because the word Pisa means marsh. And the foundation is 10 feet deep. That's it. And so Paul uses this language of foundation in a very, very important way, because he wants to be able to remind us that the things that we do, the things that really matter, are the things that are so very often unknown, unseen, and unremembered. But they're the things that shape lives forever. And this is the great privilege that for so many of these kids that are up here, they're just beautiful and precious. And I think about all the great opportunity and privilege that we have, not just for you as parents and grandparents, but we have to be in their lives and to be able to pour in things into their lives that they may never know. And they certainly will most likely not remember, at least the fullness of it in those early years, and yet how important and how critical that is. I've got 3 sons. I used to always kind of laugh about it. I said, I only made one prayer for my kids ever. The only prayer I ever had for all 3 of my sons is that they would follow Jesus. And all 3 do. Now, I wish I had added graduate high school, go to college, those kinds of, I wish I'd kind of added that, but that one thing. And I will tell you why. Not simply because of what they received from their mom and their dad, but from men like Cullen Davis and Tim Shrewsbury. These guys that most of you would never even know or heard. They were the quirkiest 2 guys I ever knew in my life. And my boys loved them because they loved my boys, and they poured into them over and over and over. Or I think about Ron Fritsch and the time that he spends with our kids in Bibles. I think about how many kids, when they come back and they move away, and they're now high school age kids, and they come up to me and I say, "It's great to see you." And they say, "Yeah, it's great to see you, but where's Miss Peggy? Where's she?" And I think about not only this amazing privilege, but this incredible responsibility. I mean, when we baptize these 3 beautiful creations of God, Logan and Lexi and Tyler, we made a commitment, a pledge to them to be their family and to pull them into our family. Not just to simply support their mom and dad, Aaron and Aaron, but for us. And you see, this is the power. And so when Paul is speaking about foundation, he knows everybody's just seeing that huge monolithic stone that's acres. They see that foundation. You can't miss it. Everywhere you go, you see it. It's there. You turn to the left, you turn back. It's always there. And they know what's at the top of it. They know what it represents. And that's the foundation on which all of Corinth has been built. And it's not seen as weird. It's not seen as immoral. It's just the way it is. I mean, this is the cultic worship. This is what we do to honor this goddess. These are all these people that come in and have all this money, and so we can use that. We can play off of that. We can become a prosperous people. We can do all of this stuff. And they don't see it as anything even weird. It's just the way it is. We have a lot of family and friends that come and go on the train station. And now with the train station, it's really interesting to me because, used to you could park there, you had all that parking space and all, but now you drop somebody off, you got to go through this little thing that about 5 cars can go through at one time because all of that other stuff is closed because the leaders of our city have decided we're going to be a casino city. And so you drive through and there's a police officer there and they are always in the worst mood because everybody's trying to break the rules and not drive through, trying to stall, and they got to deal with all of that. And so I went up to one of them, one of the last times I was there, and he looked at me like he was just going to, I said, hey, I'm a friend. And I said, I just want to ask you a question. I said, is the casino going to be worth all of this? And he looked at me and said, how am I dressed? I said, you think that's going to bring value to my life and what I do? But you see, it's easy just to, so Paul, what Paul does is he says, okay, we're not going to fight it that way. We're going to win this way. We are going to create something. We're going to create a new temple. We're going to create the church. And when he says you are the temple, that's a plural. He's not saying your body is a temple, even though he does in other, but in this context, we, We're the temple. You yourselves, plural, are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in you, in your midst. Anyone who destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person, for God's temple is sacred, for you together are that temple. You're sacred. We're sacred when we're together. And this is the foundation of everything that Paul says. This is the foundation of our lives. This is the foundation of who we are in Christ. Because Paul says no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. And so what Paul says now, we're going to build this amongst ourselves. We're going to identify ourselves, and we're not going to be the people that come along and say, well, that's the big thing there. We're not going to deal with that. We're going to do our stuff. He says, no, we're going to hit it head on because we're going to create an alternative. We're going to create an alternative. He has so much conversation about sexuality and how it should be expressed and all that's there in those letters to the Corinthians. We're going to be a different people. We're going to have a different foundation. We're going to have a different understanding. And that foundation is going to be, as Paul says, by the grace God has given me. It's a foundation on grace. And it's relational. It's with Jesus. And it has a purpose. It's not something that appeases a God like this monolithic thing. It's something that has a purpose, that is to share its life for the world, to give its life for the world, to die for the world. It's the antithesis. It's the anti-God, in a sense, of what the Romans and the Greeks would see. And this is who we are. And so then we ask ourselves the question, who are we for you and your family? What are the things that you do as a family that may not be seen by anyone else? That may not even be remembered by your kids when they're little? And that they become the things that shape and define and decide them. I've been here long enough to see some generations grow. And it's always fascinating to me to see how many times the mannerisms of a woman in her 30s and 40s are exactly like her mom. Or like your oldest daughter, Rachel, has your voice. It's like if I weren't knowing who I was talking to, it is. And all of those things, those are the things. That's what matters. How do they see us love? How do they see us engage in the political arena? How do they see us drive our cars down the interstate when someone cuts us off? How do they hear us talk about our faith, about who Jesus is to us and why Jesus matters to us? How do they see how we live our financial life? These are the things, these are the foundations. And it's the same thing for us as a church. How do we model grace? How do we live an alternative life and yet not stand in judgment of others? But simply say, we have something that we believe God has called us to, and we would love for you to come and taste and see that it is good. How do we live as these people? It's all about that grace. And it's all about realizing it's not so much the things that are of, what does he say? If it's of gold and silver and costly stones and wood and hay and straw. No, it's about the foundation, the things that aren't seen. So the first day of preschool, we measure the morning quality by how many crying babies and kids we have. And it was actually probably our best year, I think. We don't measure the moms that are crying as they're leaving, which was pretty numerous this time. But towards the end of the day, about pickup time, I happened to be back down, and there was a family picking up, and two little girls, beautiful little girls. Oldest is 4, I think, and then the youngest is toddler. And the toddler age, the youngest one was really had a hard day. She's crying through a lot of the day. And so mom comes in, gets her 4-year-old, and then kind of suits up to go in to get the other one. And the other one comes out with a teacher, and the 4-year-old sees her sister, and she runs the hall and grabs her and picks her up and swings her around and says, I missed you so much, I missed you so much. I love you so much, I love you so much. And I'm over there just melting. A sacred moment. And the thing is so fascinating to me, None of that will be remembered by either one of them. But what happened will live forever. Let us be the people who do not seek things for ourselves. Let us be a people who live into the purpose of our Savior Jesus Christ, who offered forgiveness to us and gave us the power and the privilege to offer it to this world. Let us be the people that do things that others don't see, the work that others don't want or would refuse to do. Let us be the ones. And let us show the world that there is a way of beauty and love and hope and promise. And we would love for you to come and be part. Amen.